Hello, everyone. Welcome to And How Does That Make You Feel? My name is Stori. Today, I am so excited because I have a very special guest. I always say that, but all my guests are so special to me. And this one is especially special because India, who was on our last episode, this is her mom. This is who we're talking about. Very nicely, of course.
I'm not worried.
And when she started to talk about your life coaching and how you had specialized in trauma and grief, I got really excited because I thought this is a perfect topic for, I think, my listeners. Because trauma and grief specifically, even for me, is such a scary topic. So scary. And I think that as you were just talking now about how, grief is a taboo topic because we just haven't normalized it, I really wanted to have you on so that we can create this space where it is normalized. You're amazing. I read your bio and we already have some of the books that you were in, but so you are a life coach, you specialize in trauma and grief. One of the things that I love that you call yourself is a heart warrior.
Yes.
I totally agree. I can resonate with that. I love connecting with people and just, operating in the sense of being compassionate. And so you also are a best-selling author in 2 books in the Allison Roberts series. We have 2 of these here, and we'll talk about them as well, but it is the Behind the Power series. I did read the healing part. This is one of the books that she's in that you talk about your journey to innocence.
Yes.
Powerful.
Oh,
and
thank you.
When you call that man a thief, I was like, I can call him a lot of other things as well. We'll get into that, but I do highly suggest reading Michelle Sullivan's parts in these Behind the Power series. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to come and be with you today.
Thank you. So we were already getting into a lot when it comes to grief.
Yes.
And again, how much of a taboo topic it is. I, for one, so my relationship with grief is I haven't had a lot of people personally around me who have passed away. The closest person being my great-grandmother, and we expected it to come. She had Alzheimer's. She was getting up there in age, and before she passed, we had that initial call. Like, okay, she's not doing well. We are preparing for, her to pass. And then just some sudden things. And what I found really strange about grief in my life is even when I wasn't close with that person, what really would always put me in such an uncomfortable position was the suddenness of it. And just how it affected the people around me. And knowing that with grief, it's like I can't take it away from someone that I love.
Right.
What has your relationship been with grief? Because it's been a pretty jarring a bit for me. How has it been for you?
Well, I'm a little bit older than you, so I have experienced a few more grief instances in my life. First of all, I think I want to just make sure that everyone listening and watching this understands that grief is not just death. So grief and loss can be anything from a breakup, a divorce, a loss of a pet, a new job, moving to a new city, anything that causes a change in the relationship that you had before can be considered grief or loss. So I like to broaden that definition just so that if someone is watching this or listening says, well, I haven't experienced grief because no one in my immediate family has died, it's a much broader topic than just that. So with that being said, for me, I think that in the beginning, because we are not used to grief and loss, just as I was saying before, we can celebrate the birth of a child, a new job, or moving into a new home. We know how to be happy. It comes naturally to us. But when we lose someone or something, it devastates us. And that's what I mean by we need to begin to normalize that, to know this is a part of life. It is a part of life. And I think you can begin to prepare yourself, I think, by living authentically, being in the moment, loving the people that you love, making time for the things and the people that really matter in your life. Because when that time comes that they're no longer with you, hopefully you won't have regrets. And let's not be macabre about it. And focusing on death, it is going to come to all of us, you know. And I mean that and so with that, making peace with that, then you can go on and live life. You can enjoy it. And now when you do lose someone, it is devastating. And this is the reason why my journey in coaching and life coaching has come to this juncture of grief coaching, because when I started, it was life coaching. And the name of my business is called The Clarity Journey. And the reason why I named it that is because I needed it for myself. So the coaching began with me first. And that transformation began back in 2016. So there was a lot that I was carrying around in my life, which in the book, my chapter talks about childhood sexual abuse at the age of 4. That was my longest held trauma that I carried with me until I was in my 50s to begin to get some help and some relief from what I experienced.
Did you, during that moment, because I know you talked about your daughters leaving the house and like now it was quiet and like you were really seeing how this trauma was still there.
Yes.
Were you experiencing any sorts of grief in that moment as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, because again, if you define grief as anything, any point in time experience in life where things were one way and now they're not, yes. And so I've even told my girls, we live in the house that they grew up in, and I say the house is haunted with ghosts, and the ghosts are the girls when they were younger, because that version of them is no longer here. They have grown up, they're adults living their lives, but I'm still in the past when they were smaller. Yeah. And so the grief work for me comes with, okay, they're safe. They're okay.
Yeah.
They're living their lives. This was a part of life that we experienced together, and it's different now. And then choosing to be okay with that.
And then I guess living in the present of, okay, what's happening right now and enjoying that. I do want to go back to you sort of realizing that, you still had that trauma in your 50s.
Yeah. Yes.
Like that's a long time.
It is. And I paid a price for it. I struggled sexually, and I am married, but I struggled sexually with that. I also struggle with depression and anxiety as a result of not working through those things. Because see, we don't really realize it, but when we're little, a lot of what we have experienced when we're children, we carry into our adult lives. And it stays hidden, and we don't know what it is, but something's just not right. And I knew that for a long time, but I tried to stay busy. I stayed busy. I didn't think about it. I didn't address it until it was silent in my life.
Yeah.
Then I heard the roar of little Michelle. I could finally hear her, and she was yelling for help. It was time to do the work on me.
Do you feel that there was a specific moment that you heard that roar? Or was it kind of like it just increasingly got louder and louder for you?
That's a good question. I think that when my youngest child left to go to college and I was sitting in my house looking around and things were different. Then I looked at myself and my health wasn't good. I was overweight. I was depressed, as I said. I suffered with anxiety. My doctor kept telling me, Michelle, you need to make changes in your life. And I finally realized it was time. It was time to work on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will say, because of what I experienced, I also struggled with boundaries and codependency, taking care of everyone else and putting myself last. And so I think I just said, okay, this enough. It's time to. This has got to stop.
Yes.
You know. So my higher mind said, okay, it's your turn. It's time to work on you. So I wish that I had done that before, but I can't change the past.
Right.
Right.
And it, like you said, it's like you knew something was wrong, but you just not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And last episode that I did, I spoke to a breathwork practitioner, and one of the things that she said with breathwork, it comes to you when you're ready.
Yes.
And I feel that way about healing.
I agree.
It comes to you when you're fully ready and accepting, or open to accepting it.
Yes, I agree.
So you were going through, like, you knew something was not quite right, but you weren't ready. You're ready. Do you remember those certain initial steps that you took to saying, okay, enough is enough. Here's where I'm going to start with myself?
It's so interesting because everything that I have experienced in my life has led me to this moment, this period of healing in my life. So when I began saying yes to me is when things began to change. So it began with me saying yes to taking control over my health and beginning with exercise. So I decided to start working out. And I thought, that'll do it. That'll help me feel better. Well, when I began experiencing success with that, I was thinking, wow, this feels really amazing. I know there are other people out there that could probably use the encouragement. And so I thought, what could I do to be an encouragement to other people? I've always believed I'm an empath, and I also am a bridge builder. So even when I was having a difficult time myself, I was always encouraging other people. So it was time to give some of that to myself. So it started with physical, taking care of my body. Then I started looking into what could I do that could make an impact in people's lives. And I came across coaching. I had never worked with a coach before. So as the universe opened up for me, God opened the doors, and I found the health coaching school, Health Coach Institute, that I enrolled in and went through their program. And as I did that, then I certified in life coaching, and I thought, oh, this is my jam. I love life coaching. I was already mentoring young women. So it just, the doors just kept opening. Now, how I got to grief was when I was working with my coach that I'm working with now, who was a cognitive behavioral therapist. She is the Allison Roberts. She was the missing piece of the puzzle for me so that I could begin to heal the inner part of Michelle. So, and I have I believe it's a gift to be able to hold space for people when they go through some of the most difficult and darkest days of their life, like death. I'm not afraid to sit across from someone and hold space for them so that they can talk about the last moment that they were with their spouse before they died. I have clients that I've worked with that were literally with their person when they transitioned.
Wow.
Yes. And so I'm not afraid of that. I can sit with people and I know what it's like to experience such dark and difficult things that you think that you can't move forward. And I'm here to say that you can, with love and compassion and with the right guidance, you can, because there is no finish line to grief. There's a starting line to healing.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
There is no finish line to the grief,
Yes.
but there is a start line to your healing.
Yes.
That is powerful. And what is even more powerful as well with you is that you have such capacity to hold for others. A capacity that isn't, you can't really find that a lot with others. And not in a judgmental way, but just in a way of, like we said, it's so, it feels icky sometimes. It's just it's like even like an itchy kind of feeling to be around someone who is going through something so dark. Where would you say a lot of that strength came from your past? Like you.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Yes, it did come from my past because I kept trying to get people to hold space for me when I wanted to talk about being sexually abused. No one could hold space for me, not even my parents. That's why if in your audience, I just want you to know that if you had something that happened to you when you were very young and you are older and you still haven't talked about it, it's hard. People they don't want to hear it. They want to move along. Oh, that happened a long time ago. It's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It is a big deal.
Why do you feel that? Why do you feel that
because
people do that?
they're uncomfortable.
Okay.
They're uncomfortable with it. They may also feel guilty because they might have known, if they had known differently, maybe they could have done something about it. They could have intervened on your behalf. But I think because I spent so many years crying out for help and no one heard me, even in my spiritual community. I will say, I mean, I grew up in a Christian home. I have faith and belief in God, but even in the Christian community, there was no one that was prepared to help me. So it was mine to carry. That's why I'm passionate about holding space for people and coaching and working with them, because I just needed someone to say, I believe you.
Wow. Do you think, just from a global perspective, how do we gain that strength to hold space for people? Because it shouldn't be that way, we shouldn't have so many people. We shouldn't have many Michelles out there like crying out for people to hold space.
Right.
And there aren't many people.
I really think that it has to come from within first. As much as we would like for other people to hear us, no one's coming to rescue us. We get to choose to begin to do the work to heal. And then you may find teachers and support along the way. But if you have a flat, this is such a great example, came from some work that I was involved in. If you have a flat tire on the side of the road, you could sit in your car and wait for someone to change the flat tire, or you could get out of the car and do it yourself. Which do you want?
I'd probably change it myself.
There you go.
Quicker.
Yeah.
Reliable. I'm here.
Right. You learn something from it. And so we're more powerful than we realize.
Oh, for sure. There have been so many times where the things that I thought were scary or incapable in my life once I simplified it, I was like, actually, I have the power in this situation. Why am I sitting here pointing the finger at everyone else when it was really me?
Yeah.
And we talked about boundaries. So, you had struggled with boundaries.
Yes.
So many situations with people. I'm like, I have the power in this situation just to tell you no and to walk the other way. But instead, I decided to complain or nitpick and why don't you do this for me? And why don't you do that? Well, how about I just go? Or how about I just set those boundaries to protect myself? Yeah. I love that. We are more powerful than we think.
Absolutely. And it does help if you can have at least one person that can be a support person for you. I will say in my particular situation as a coach, as a life coach, I have permission, will not disclose too much, but I had a client whose husband, as I said, died in her arms, and she fought getting help. She did not want to go and get help. She was so angry because of what had happened. He shouldn't have died. I shouldn't be a widow at age 40. He was too young, to the point that she attempted to take her life. And she was not successful, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah.
And it took a few years of us working together for her to finally get to a place of recovery from what happened. But we had to take very tiny baby steps to get there. Because she was willing. She was willing. She realized I have something that I want to live for, even though I lost the most important person in my life.
So, speaking of just like that journey with her through the grief, the fighting of it, and then finally getting to a place of recovery, it does bring me back to the theme of the 7 stages of grief. How do you feel about that? Like, what has been your experiences with leading people through grief? Are there stages or?
That's such a great question. I'm really glad that you asked that. I believe that, well, first of all, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was the person that wrote the book about the stages of grief. In context, if you read the book, the book is the 7 stages of grief are for the person that's dying.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Not for the person who is on the other side and is experiencing loss, okay? And it makes sense if you think about it, that those stages would make sense if you are in a situation, a terminal situation where you're dying. But I think that those emotions we feel them all, but they don't, it's not a mathematical equation of, oh, I feel this way. What's next? Oh, then there's this anger. It's not linear. Okay. It can be all over the place.
And can you be in like multiple places at the same time?
Most definitely. As a matter of fact, I remind my clients, you can hold grief and joy in the same container. It's a choice. Yes, you lost this, but what do you remember about them? We think maybe we have to be all sad, but you can hold multiple emotions at the same time. And I think that's a healthy way, because if you've experienced loss and you think, well, I have to be sad all the time.
Yeah.
When are you ever going to be happy? When are you going to experience joy? You get to choose.
Is it also so holding spaces for both? And I have heard some people, when they lost, they were like, well, I would rather people ask me stories about them.
Yes.
So I can continue to live in the joy of what, the things that we got to experience together. I'm sure there's also other emotions that people might be holding at the same time. like the anger of it.
Yes.
Like your client who was like, they just shouldn't have died.
Mm-hmm.
I'm angry that happened.
Right.
What other emotions are people usually battling with grief? I think a really tough one too for people sometimes is if they didn't have the best relationship with that person.
Mm-hmm.
How do people navigate? I'm sure there's a resentment with that too.
Right. And so with that particular situation, I work with my clients on grief recovery, which is it's like a course that I teach them. And it's about working through all of those things. Mm-hmm. So you get completion and especially around the things that you didn't get to say or that didn't get to be worked out before the loss, you can still choose to forgive. You have to know what it is. And so when I work with my clients, we go there and we do a graph and really kind of get into the nitty gritty of their life and the relationship with that person. Then I teach them how to do a letter of completion where they write a letter to that person. And it is I've so many times my clients have said to me, that was a huge release for me when I was able to acknowledge what it was, write the letter, and then say goodbye, because they're saying goodbye to the pain. They're not saying goodbye to the person.
The pain.
Goodbye to the pain. Mm-hmm.
Do you think they at first thought they would have to say goodbye to that person?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I reassure them, I'm not here to work with you to, discard the relationship or the person. But even with forgiveness, it's a gift that we give ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. So when we can release that, you may have a few good memories of that person and you can hold on to those. Mm-hmm. So it really is very beautiful. One of the most important things that anyone can do with another person. So let's say you have a close friend that has experienced something very difficult. Yeah. The best thing that we can do for them is listen. Mm-hmm. Not to give advice, not to say, well, they're in a better place, or you were too good, you didn't deserve that person, whatever. No, nothing. You just sit there and listen. That's what they need.
In those moments where, because I have a friend who lost her best friend, I always wonder if it's like, okay, should I periodically reach out and say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Because I'm always scared. I don't want to, make her trigger her again with grief. But I mean, she's grief, so I'm sure she's feeling it at every possible moment of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. When people don't ask for help, do you still reach out and say, well, every once a week, I'll come to them and say, how are you feeling?
Yeah. I think I would want to have a very honest conversation with them.
Okay.
This is what I would say. Stori, I really care about you, and I cannot say that I can relate to what you're going through, but what do you need from me? How can I show up for you? And you ask them what they need, and they may say, it really would be nice if I could have an opportunity to talk about my dog that died.
Just be that.
Yeah.
Fulfill that.
Exactly. You don't have to offer any advice or anything. And you just make eye contact with them. And don't wipe away their tears. Let the tears fall, because that's also a part of the grieving process. And if we say, don't cry, they need to cry. Yeah.
It's almost kind of shutting them down.
Yes.
In such a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that was one of the reasons I was so excited to speak with you, because I have friends who are going through rough things, and say, how do I show up for them in a way that's genuine? Because I do want to help, but that isn't the whole, they're in a better place, or I'm so sorry for your loss. It's like, oh, they're probably hearing that at every moment of the day, and it's not helping, and they're probably frustrated as well with it. So what can we actually do as an audience, as a global community, to be that space for the people we love when they're going through grief?
I think, especially if it's someone that's close to you, if they know that they can be safe with you, even in sharing their emotions, that's really important. Again, being there for them, not offering advice or anything along those lines, but just truly be there for them. It's important. And I will say, my experience with that in the global community, I volunteer with a program called Trauma Intervention Program. And it's a nonprofit volunteer organization in Western North Carolina, where I live. We're called by first responders when there's been death or rape, house fire, you name it. Anything that the first responders know these people or this person might need some emotional support.
Yeah.
And they call us, and we're called to go to the scene and be with the family or the individual. These are people I don't know.
And they just have been through the most traumatic event in their life.
And I will just say that even in that instance, the very same thing as I'm sharing with you, I go, I introduce myself, and I sit with them.
You just sit.
Yes. I listen. I offer Kleenexes, a bottled water. I pay attention.
And that's all they need.
Yes.
Especially in that moment.
Yes.
And I also talked with India about this too. We both agreed that just like societal wise, it's very difficult for people to just sit with people in uncomfortable emotions. Just be there. It's like, I have to fix it, or I can't deal with this. I'm going to exit the situation, or okay, so it's going to get better. Trust me. All right. I'm going to go this way. But I do think, and especially when I've read books about emotions, like Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, and just how powerful and impactful it is just to sit with people. You don't need to feel their emotions. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to say, who do I need to fight for you? You just need to sit there and listen.
Yes. Yeah. I will say again, in the volunteer aspect of the work that I do, I'm only with that person for a few hours, and I'm never going to see them again. But in that moment, I give them everything I have, that emotional first aid, the heart warrior, to just be there with that person. And I think also intuitively knowing how to ask questions if the person wants to talk, that can be helpful as well. And when a person has experienced loss, they're in shock.
Yeah.
So that's where the training that I've experienced has come in handy, because I know what to look for. But still, even if you've never gone through any training, you can really, a great place to start is to be a heart with ears and listen to people.
I love that, heart with ears. And I love the emotional first aid. That is very important. We think about the actual Band-Aids, but the emotional part of it. How can we, if any, because I know you said, working on ourselves first could be the start of preparing our own grief work. I mean, it's going to come. It's life. If it's not death, it's a breakup, friendship breakup, or a romantic one, a loss of a job. Anything can happen. What are other ways that we can prepare ourselves now to do that work, so that when we are faced with grief, we know how to get ourselves through it?
That's a very good question. that kind of makes me think about how we build our immune system. Mm-hmm. So our immune system is able to fight the disease, the airborne pathogens or whatever, that come our way. So there are some things that I think that are very important. One is taking self-care is really important. So some people carry a badge of honor that they go. They don't eat well. They don't get enough rest. They're not exercising. That is going to break down the body and our mind. And so self-care, taking care of yourself is really important. And I think now more than ever, it's talked about. It's encouraged. It's not bubble baths and chocolate and manicures. Sometimes it's just maybe sitting in a quiet space and doing some meditation. I love to meditate. I started it 4 years ago, and it's a daily thing for me. It helps me get started with my day. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely encourage people to look at things that can build their personal immune system, the self-care. It might be relaxation. It might be getting outside in nature and experiencing something, even looking at birds, listening to birds. There's a whole therapy in just bird watching alone.
Really?
Yeah. Or even sitting in front of an aquarium looking at fish. Mm. We are so bombarded with words and sounds that we are so overstimulated.
No.
Yeah. And so to be able to slow down and take care of yourself, I think that is a great beginning, because if you then have that self-empathy for yourself, you then can begin to offer that to other people.
So what I'm hearing is the best work that we can do to prepare ourselves for grief is build up like a healthy spiritual regimen that builds us up. And so when we are faced with that grief, we have the right resources and tools that we can start to pull from when needed.
Yes, for sure. And curiosity is important. As when you're going through a grief experience, you're not going to be open because you're heavy in your grief. But I want your audience to know that there are people out in the world doing this work that will offer emotional support for them. I have a client that I'm working with right now. She lives in France. Yes. And so by the magic of, Zoom, we work together every week. And so there are people in the world that can support you. You're not alone. I think asking for help is really important. And if you don't find what you're looking for, we live in an age, you can Google anything.
Yes. Yeah.
There is support out there for that. Some people might need therapy. So, and I encourage people, are you seeing a therapist? Sometimes they need to go see their doctor, their general practitioner. There may be some depression situation that they need to be seen for. Coaching is just another tool that can be used. It's proactive. So, but there are a lot of ways that a person can learn to navigate grief that are out there.
And I do think that as we build ourselves up, and like you said, when you experience it, you're in the thick of grief at that moment. And I think that's a perfect kind of segue into people who are grieving right now and are listening to this, and they're trying to figure out how to get through it, asking for help, knowing that there are resources and communities that they can join to help them.
Yes.
Is there any other advice that you, sort of general, because of course, everyone's situation is so different, but is there any general advice that you would give to someone who is currently in grief, which is a lifelong thing?
I honestly, I think I would just go back to that self-love, um, and asking yourself, what do I need right now? Um, do I need to cry? If you need to cry, is there someone that you can go to that could say, hey, Stori, I need a good cry. Could you just sit with me while I do that? Yeah, and it's hard to ask for what we need sometimes, but um, that self-love is so, so important. And anger. There are rage rooms. Have you heard of
I
rage
have.
rooms?
I've thought about it.
I mean, my goodness, I have a friend, a coach friend, that is wanting to start a rage room in Florida. And, it's okay to be angry. Honestly, and this was very surprising to me, but people can be angry at the person who died because they're not here anymore. No more holidays with you. You were supposed to walk me down the aisle or whatever,
Yeah.
And so we can even be angry at the person that died because they died. That's okay. That's all right. But let's work through that. Don't stay in the narrative, because the story is just a story. So you can write a different ending, even if you did lose someone. It takes work.
Yeah.
But it can be done.
That's funny that you mentioned the anger and being angry at the person.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of us, because going back to how you said that grief isn't just death, it could be loss of any kind, an ending of any kind that we grieve. I wonder how many of us are actually grieving and we don't know it.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know that there's certain things that we are grieving or haven't given ourselves permission to grieve.
Yes. Yes. That's I'm so glad that you said that, because we all of us are grievers. Every person that watches this interview, every person that listens to it, you are a griever. And it could be that you've not allowed yourself to grieve. And maybe there's a part of you that is crying out, but you're not listening to yourself.
Are there any indicators that we can see within ourselves, or is it really just that complex that we have to kind of find out, oh, I'm actually grieving that?
I think if you are a person that is internally aware, you probably could pick up on it.
Okay.
But for others, again, it might just be, think about it like approaching a child, a small child, or a little animal. You have to approach it very slowly and gain the trust. So again, this goes back to the inner child work, and we've not talked about it, but that was what turned things around for me with childhood sexual abuse, was inner child work. I had to approach that 4-year-old Michelle as this adult woman, approach her, because see, I left her behind. I left her at that place where all of that happened. And she was waiting for me to come back and rescue her. And I didn't know how, but once I learned how, then I was able to go back. I didn't realize how deeply that affected me.
Was it the inner child healing that you did that led you to the path of recovery when it came to the grief?
Yes. Yes.
And so for that person out there, them doing that inner child work, that could also could kind of be like a catalyst to their path of recovery. And
I do believe that, but I think that that inner child work, it would be good to look for someone who could help be your guide on that journey. There are a lot of self-help books out there, but I think that to have a guide to help you go through it would be would be a good bet. It would be a good way to go, because if we walk into, we might not want to walk into a dark forest by ourselves.
Yeah.
But if we have someone that we know that's walking alongside us, we might go just a little bit further because we had that support.
Mm. And that could be like a therapist or the life coach or a counselor to guide us through all of that.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone, if they're looking for healing, to find someone that could do inner child work with you, because for everyone, that's a great place to start.
So much happens in the childhood.
It does. Between years of 0 to 7 is where most of our beliefs and our thoughts are stemmed from what happens in ages 0 to 7.
Even what I just learned, even the birth part of it can be traumatic for us in the body. So is everything. I mean, when I was going through, and I'm still in therapy, but when I first started, so much of the conversation was my childhood. What ideas and beliefs I began to establish about myself were happening at such a young age.
Yeah.
And it was mind blowing to see. I was like, that carried all the way here now. And here I am seeing how it's manifesting in my life. And so for you, when, we're talking about your, the molestation that you had experienced and how it was manifesting as you began to grow up, a lot of it manifesting. I just wonder how people can start to see, okay, like something isn't quite right. Like there are things that I'm doing or believing or engaging in. This isn't the healthiest, or this isn't quite right. Where's this coming from? But I feel like that's such a personal journey.
Yeah, it is a personal journey. Again, I use, of course, the grief recovery method, and I will just say that the Grief Recovery Institute has been around for over 40 years. And if anyone ever wants, they will send you a book for free if you pay for shipping and handling.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great resource.
So it's the Grief Recovery Institute, and I'm certified as a specialist, and that's where I learned how to help people learn how to navigate through that. But there are short-term energy relieving behaviors, STIRBs, in short, and those are behaviors that we will engage in that are we just don't know how to deal with what we're experiencing. So we'll use alcohol, drugs, sex, food, sleeping. There's so many behaviors that we will use just to escape what's going on. But awareness is really important. So that book, the Grief Recovery Handbook, would be a great book for anyone to get to, and you could go through it on your own. You wouldn't have to work with me or anyone else. They could get the book and work through the book themselves. It's a pretty incredible program.
I think that's a great resource because the awareness piece is the main thing.
Yes.
And
I say it's 90%.
You have to be aware of it because everything that the trauma or the experiences or whatever, they manifest so differently for everyone. And so my question has always been like, how can I help people see in themselves, oh, okay, actually I am starting to notice certain things, and maybe that, where is that getting the curiosity part of it as well. Because I could ask you, well, how does this manifest? And you're like, well, it can manifest this way for that person and another way for that person. It's just.
Yeah. And grief in and of itself is unique. So everyone is not going to even experience grief the same way. So you can make assumptions that because a person lost their mother and they don't talk about her, you could assume that they don't love her, which is not true. Everyone navigates grief differently. And we have to allow for that. You have to allow for that individuality. Some people want to grieve alone.
Mm.
Others want to talk about their experience or their loved one. It's very unique.
I mean, but I've always heard when people are grieving publicly, and it's like, well, shouldn't they be more sad, or shouldn't they do this, or shouldn't they do that? And of course, as we are beginning to talk about things like this, it's always, well, people grieve differently.
They do.
You can't judge that person for how they're grieving or how they look like they're grieving.
Right. Yeah.
It's all different.
Yeah.
Is there one thing, or maybe multiple things, that you feel the general public needs to believe, learn, accept about grief? Like, is there anything that you're like, this is such a misconception, I need people to get it out their head, or life would be so much better if people knew this about grief?
Well, I think probably going back to what I said in the beginning is learning how to normalize it. It's a part of life. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, we can make assumptions about other people based on their behavior, and we can be dead wrong. Pardon the pun, but we could be so wrong. So to not make assumptions on other people that, oh, well, they're not crying enough, or they're not, why are they happy? Why are they laughing? When my grandfather died, and he came from a Scottish English background, they were very stoic, very stern, and, and at his graveside, we were all laughing.
Yeah.
Because he was a funny man, and we were talking about the funny stories, the things that he did and said, and they're about to lower him into the ground, and the other side of the family, they did not understand that.
Yeah.
Why are they laughing?
This is sad.
Exactly. Because, again, expectations. We have an expectation that people need to act a certain way when they experience grief, and we need to let that go.
That's a good one. I didn't think about, but I hear it. But like I said, I see it all the time where people have these certain expectations of how a grieving person should look, and even maybe how long they should be grieving.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: culturally, see, even different cultures grieve differently, right?
Yes.
Yes. So where did that come from? Why would one culture grieve a certain way? Because it was always done that way?
It has to be like a society, like just what one person said, this is how it should go, and then we all went with it.
So can we change that?
We should.
We should, right?
Should. Because it's only based on what's one person said, and we're like, oh yeah, let's all go with it.
Yeah.
This is how grief should be. And I guess, we can talk forever about this, but I don't want to keep you so long. Even for me, so this is a bit of a selfish question.
Okay.
So for my own, like I said, relationship with grief, and how it's a bit scary for me. I just don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about the day that someone I'm close to is, because death is so permanent for me.
I think it is for everyone.
Yeah. But then there's people who are like, once they go on the other side, but their spirit's still here. It's just like, oh, they didn't really go away. They're here in some form or fashion. I mean, in your experience, do you see people who are really just scared of it? Like they just don't want to even touch it? And what would your advice be to not be so scared?
Yeah. Is this person afraid of death, them dying, or someone else?
Someone else.
So what I would kind of dial it back to, what are you afraid of with when it comes to death for yourself? What are you afraid of?
That's a deep one.
It is deep. And so it's easier to say someone else. This is where the life coaching part of me comes in, but it's easy to say my grandma, what do I do if I lose my grandmother? Really, let's talk about us. Because it is about us.
Yeah.
We're afraid of dying. And I think it's because we just don't know what's next.
That is the biggest question.
Yeah.
That's for me at least. Is,
yeah.
Well, then what happens?
Right. Well, I don't know because I've not died and come back. I have had a near-death experience.
Oh, have you?
I did. Having my second daughter, I almost died in the hospital. What it created for me was anxiety and a fear of dying. But I'm still here. So apparently, whatever they did for me worked. But I was afraid of death for a long time when I had that close call. And it gave me anxiety. And I found it very difficult to stay in the present moment. I wanted to hold on to that life so tightly. And as I've gotten older, I just see it happens. We are here and then we're not.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as what's beyond that, I can only share with you my belief, but that's all it is just my belief. I do believe that there is something better on the other side of this life. I believe that we do continually living. I don't believe that we come back I don't believe in reincarnation, but I do believe that we have a spirit, a soul that resides in us that lives forever. And so that for me gives me peace for when the time comes, when my time comes.
And you believe that through your coaching, if you can find that acceptance in your own, it kind of helps the fear of, oh, I don't want to lose my grandma or my grandpa or my mom or my dad. And that's what I struggle with is I hold on so tight to those moments and it's robbing me, honestly, of those moments where I can just be in the present and enjoy what's happening. Yeah. And so it has been something that I've been working on personally. This is like a therapy session. Welcome. I've really been trying to work on that anxiety that I feel with, oh, I don't want to lose this, but in the same time, I'm losing it anyway because I'm not in the present. Yeah. And what you were saying, well, how do you feel about your own passing? I was like, I never thought of that. So I will put that as a prompt in my journal and work through, well, how do I feel about my own passing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My grandfather, before he died, he had one eye. He lost an eye as a young boy in a lumber accident. His father owned a sawmill in Kentucky, and he lost an eye. And my grandmother told me that before he died, they were in a dark room with just that one light overhead, but it wasn't in his face. And my grandfather said, "Get that bright light out of my eyes." And I went, okay, I can trust him. There was light on the other side of where he was going. I hold on to that. That may not be reassuring to anyone else, but it is reassuring to me that there is something on the other side. I believe I am going to be reconnected with all of the people that I love. I believe in that. And even if it isn't true, I still choose to believe that.
The choice we're talking about, the choice. Well, this was such a fulfilling conversation, and do not be surprised when I ask you back.
I would love to come back.
Because this was so much fun.
It was fun.
This was so much fun. Mm-hmm. And for everyone out there listening or watching, please do pick up Allison Roberts' Behind the Power. Michelle is in books. It's a series of 3 books, and so her stories are in the book 2 and book 3. I've been reading it, like I said, just hearing your story about your journey back to innocence and how what triggered that, and you getting to this beautiful space now where you are happy, you're living your best life, you're in alignment and fulfilled, especially in your coaching. I was also reading that in your bio as well. Where can people find you? I'll put everything in the description, but if you want to tell people how they can connect with you.
Sure. So there's a couple of ways that you can find me. I would say I have a public Facebook group that I would like to invite you to come join. It's called Grief Recovery Support. That is just a free, I give back to the world support and encouragement, and use a lot of the things that I use with other clients. But I support people that way. So I encourage that. You can also reach me at the clarityjourney@gmail.com, which is my email address. And the Clarity Journey 65, I'm on Instagram as well. So, and I also have, if you do join Grief Recovery Support, I have a private listener line. It's called The Listener. And I have 2 days out of the week that I'm open for 3 hours to hold space for people who want to call and talk. It's a free call. I'm just there to hold space and listen to them. I don't have to know you, but if you want to talk, I have a number that you can call, and you can find it on Grief Recovery Support.
Isn't she amazing? She's so amazing.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all. Oh, one more thing. So we just talked about grief and shared with the listeners about grief journey, personally, how to prepare for it. I want to ask you, how does that make you feel to share this message with the listeners?
It makes me so happy. It makes me so happy to be able to support and encourage you through the darkest, most difficult times of your life. And if I can be a light to help you maybe on the path, then I will have fulfilled my mission here in this life. So I love what I do, even though it is hard. I absolutely love it. And I'll keep doing it until I have no more breath in my body.
And we love you. Thanks. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As I said, I will put all the ways that you can connect with Michelle in the descriptions of this episode. Until next time, please remember to be kind to yourself.